Good morning, and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, the podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to this city letter carrier with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball. Today, we will be doing our special episode once again. We did it before, I think it was about 2 months ago. We had a combined episode with APW You, Eric Charnoby. Once again, we will be doing the same format. We're going to be asking each other 3 questions and compare and contrast between our crafts. And I'd like those of you who are from a different craft, if you're from rural or mail handler or any other craft within the Postal Service, please feel free to reach out to us because I'd like to have a round table of at least 4 of us. That'd be cool. But without further ado, today's going to be a relatively short one. I recorded the conversation on the 16th, but I had another episode that I had to do because I wanted to do that episode first. So this will be released on Monday, but see you on the other side. Have a good day. All right. So we're over here with good friend, Eric Charnoby, and we're going to do our episode again where we go over some compares and contrasts with APW and NALC. I'm hoping to get other crafts in on it in the future, but Eric, would you please introduce yourself?
Of course, I am Eric Charnoby. I am a officer in the 480-41 area local, officer for the state of Michigan, and I do some work for the national APWU.
All right. What about your podcast? You going to mention that?
That'd be a fantastic idea. I am the host of the podcast APW You, that's APWYOU, with Eric Charnoby. Kind of doing the same thing you're doing here, educating the membership and other stewards.
And for those folks that might be listening on Eric's podcast, I'm going to introduce myself as well. I'm Joshua Schrum. I'm the Roseville Wrecking Ball. The Roseville Wrecking Ball. And, you know, I'm a steward out of Roseville, Michigan. I have a podcast called Parcels of Knowledge, teaching carriers about their rights. And I'm just really excited to be here with Eric today. Now, we got, just like last time, we're going to have 3 questions that we're going to ask each other. Last time I started, so Eric, you go ahead and start with your first question, please.
Absolutely. My first question is, how long does it take to reach the top step of the NALC pay scale?
Well, that answer is complex, but it's also not going to be a long one. Essentially, they keep adding and subtracting steps. 2 contracts ago, we got added a step. It was somewhere around 13 years and something changed after you become regular. Now it's reduced down to 12. Either way, our pay increases are 46 weeks apart for each pay increase. And they cut off the beginning, so now we start at B instead of A. And we end at, let's see, I don't know the exact letter we end at, but it's about 12 years down the road. And that's about $39 at the current moment right now. And it starts off about like 22.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Perfect. We're in a similar boat.
Yeah. How's it work for you?
We're around 12, 13 years to get to the top step. It does depend on your levels. We have multiple levels as opposed to the tighter grade that you have.
All right. Yeah, I saw there's you got a whole lot of different crafts, right?
We do.
Sorry, I'm using sound effects. I thought it would be funny to use that alert noise whenever I learn something that I like. All right.
I like it.
My turn. I'm going to ask you, how strict is management with uniform policy in your craft? And do they also try to use non-compliance with uniform policy in order to blame your members for their own accidents? And I'm going to preface this real quick. What I mean by that is, as soon as we get into an accident, management is less interested in our safety and more interested in liability. So what they do is they say, hey, let me take a picture of your shoes. And they go straight to, oh, well, if the carrier didn't have green tag shoes, well, then they caused their own accident. Even if it has nothing to do with shoes, like even if it has to do with dog biting you. So that's the context.
Gotcha. And that, unfortunately, the answer is it depends. I've represented employees from multiple crafts, and I'll give a real example. I was representing an employee who got to 2 accidents back to back. In the interviews, management didn't care about his shoes. or his uniform. It was all about the accident. On the inverse side, I had another employee from a different facility who slipped and fell, and management was very interested in the footwear. I think what it boils down to for the APW members is if management has an excuse, something to blame for the accident, they don't care about a uniform. But if there is nothing to blame, they're going to start nitpicking.
Okay, so for you, it's basically very situational.
Absolutely.
All right, that makes sense. All right, you go ahead and shoot. What do you got for me for my second question?
My second question is going to be, how active is the average carrier in the NALC?
Honestly, I feel like this is across all boards in terms of unionizing and unionization and whether or not people are active. I think that it has to do with a lot of times not having a lot of money creates apathy or creates a need for a distraction from or maybe even a second job. So a lot of times our Table 2 carriers, which is our newer hires, I think after 2014, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there, they are less likely to vote, less likely to show up to a meeting, but it makes sense because, when you're making not enough money, you're not going to invest yourself into your job as in extracurricular ways. Instead, you're going to maybe try and figure out how you're going to pay your electric bill, or try and figure out, where to get a second job, or how to reduce your expenses, or distract yourself from the things. So I think that our older carriers are very active, and our younger carriers, they kind of checked out sometimes. And we're trying to turn that around, but it as you might already know, it's a very difficult process, and it may never happen because whatever the member wants that's the membership's will. So I think that if they don't want to tune in, I guess maybe they won't have to.
That's interesting. That's essentially the same. We have the same issue. You're right, it's across the board. But I never connected the financial reality of the situation we're in with the fact that we're struggling to engage younger workers.
Yeah, I only know because of my history. I was going to do a background episode on my podcast about me because I didn't really talk too much about myself and my background. But I think I'll put it on my Patreon now that I have a Patreon. I think I'm going to keep the non-educational, behind the scenes stuff on my Patreon, and then on my podcast, I'll do the educational so I don't gatekeep. So, but it has to do with my organizing background, and my last job, it was especially bad. And that's because we were making close to minimum wage wages. So the less value you get for your dollar, the more apathy ends up happening for some reason. And, we had 17,000 members in my last union for my local, and only 2 members would ever show up to the meetings other than the people who were full-time officers. So I just kind of already have a lot of experience with that, and I just see the parallels in what we're experiencing today. But I'm going to go on to my next question.
Sure.
Do you guys, as in the APWU, have a catalog of arbitrations or decisions for stewards to access and develop themselves with, as in educate themselves with how arbitrators think?
That question is a doozy, and I'm actually excited for it. The answer is yes and no. We have 2 databases. One is anyone, you don't have to be a steward. You don't even have to sign into our website. The National APW website does have, we call the contract database, that has step 4 decisions, MOUs, things of that nature. As far as arbitrations go, we do have a restricted program that is run by LexisNexis, but it's typically reserved for presidents, their designees, and arbitration advocates. There is a level of gatekeeping involved, for better or worse.
Oh, no.
With APW.
Oh, no. That's not good. Gatekeeping is always a hot topic of mine. But, yeah, I mean, that should never happen in any union. Like, gatekeeping is the worst thing you can do, to be honest. But you did answer my question. We in the NALC, we have a website, but it's under our member website. They can give us access to these arbitration decisions. And I don't necessarily like it. We got gatekeeping as well. In fact, our region is known for thinking that our stewards are so dumb that if they give them access by default, then they think that we'll put the wrong things in our case file and lose it. So with that being said, they only like to give it to arbitration advocates, not necessarily to gatekeep education, but they're worried that if we were given instructions not to put these arbitrations into our case file, that we would do it anyway, and in doing so, we'd put the wrong ones in. It's kind of a stupid thing, but all right. So you can ask me my last and final question. If we're fast enough, I got a bonus round too, and I think you'll really be interested in this one.
Well, then let's get this through. My final question is going to be, what training does the NALC offer stewards?
Well, it's relatively regional. If you want to talk about effectiveness or realistic, because they do offer national training, whether it's at the conventions or sometimes they had like a Formal A and Beyond, which is our second step of the grievance procedure. Sometimes they had, right now they're doing informal A classes, but it's unrealistic because you got to meet at some central location in the United States. And a lot of branches don't have the money to send their people there. And to be honest, the regions do the same trainings, in fact, even better because they're region specific even. So many branches don't end up sending their people over to nationals training because it's just, I think it's a primitive way to do it in person. Maybe if it was online, maybe you can do some courses on the same members portal. Maybe then it would be realistic for them to get trained by national. But if we're talking about my region, which I'm most familiar with, that region is very phenomenal at training. We do what's called SOS1, School of Stewards, SOS2, and SOS3. One, the way they do it now is one is just a general introduction because they understand that the first time you hear it, you're not going to retain everything. The second class is to prepare you for Informal A, which is they'll give you the pieces of a case file. You'll have the ability to request additional information, and you'll meet with them as if they were management and create your own Informal A case file. And then SOS3, it's even more in depth, and it's basically Formal A. So they'll give you Informal A impasse to Formal A, and you will have to use only what's in the case file to develop your contentions further and to determine what you're going to negotiate for when you meet with management. But at the end of that class, they also let you write a Step B settlement, which is our third process. The third part of the process, they pair you up with another member, another carrier that's a steward, and one of you is going to be management's representative, and the other one of you is going to be the union. And you guys are tasked with using the template that they have to write out a remedy that is Step B worthy. It's a pretty good training. I think we got really good training. It's just that, again, sometimes it seems to be gate kept, but that's not necessarily always the case.
All right, and that's interesting. Is the APW is so autonomous as far as local ability goes that most locals handle their own training. Where even when my work for the state, when we do training, it's almost seen as a bonus rather than a critical part of the structure. Even the national training, it leads on our side to a highly varied, different level of product, I guess is the way to put it. I'd like this far more structured what you're discussing.
Yeah, I think that training is just a form of art that some people have mastered and some people need to work on it. And it's sad because the entire future is dependent on that training. So, but I'll go into my last question, then we're going to have a bonus round. I just want to have a discussion about something I see, competition between the two of us as unions, and maybe you won't see it as a competition, but we'll just have a conversation. But my last question, other than the bonus round, does the APWU push for their members to make contributions to any sort of political fund that they run? Like ours, they push it way too much, and they push our health insurance. And I get it. It's good. But it's like they almost dedicate too much energy to that and not enough energy about things like contract enforcement. And I agree that it's important. But I think we got to start with getting the basics perfected and then move on to legislative. But legislative is important. We shouldn't ignore it either. But I don't think we should act like salespersons. But what does the APW do?
We do have our own political fund. We call it COPA, Committee for on Political Action. And we don't really push it that hard to members. It's mentioned in orientation. It's not hidden. It runs in our national paper occasionally. It's pushed more to stewards and officers to both disseminate and to contribute.
Nice.
It's brought up at normally state conventions. There's always a booth at the national convention for COPA. It's there. We encourage it, but it's not shoved down your throat. Neither do we do that with our insurance either.
Man, my place, they act like it's a competition. It's like they're constantly posting all the branches, all their numbers, and acting like, if you don't, like I've been told before, because I only contribute a small portion. I don't make a lot of money. And I've been told before, hey, you don't contribute enough. Can you increase that? And it's like, it's almost like the branches are dependent upon looking good if they got additional money. I don't like that. I don't like that look. And maybe that's not intended, but that's what it looks like.
And for us, it's more of an individual competition. In our national convention, we will get a voucher to the APW store based on what we contribute. But that is a discount, but it's secretive. It's put in your bag. You're not criticized. If you go up to the booth, yes, the COPA volunteers will discuss with you what you contribute and try to talk you up, try to upsell you to donate more. But you have to walk into that. I haven't seen it where someone's hounding you in anywhere in the APW.
Yeah, I think mostly they hound like the people who want to be active at the events and stuff. But moving on, we're going to move into our bonus thing. Are you aware of the grievance management audit report that was published by the Office of Inspector General yesterday?
The grievance audit report.
Grievance management.
Yes. Yep. Is that the $1 billion payout one?
Yep. So I just want to mention something that I think is interesting. And if you want to comment, feel free to. But the NALC, turns out, has got you beat in 2 different ways out of 3 when it comes to grievances. And it turns out that, so for grievance payouts, the one way you beat us out is you've got the largest number. So out of the amount paid between the scope years, 22 to 24, APWU has gotten $372 million in payouts. And the NALC has only gotten $350 million in payouts. Now, alternatively, you guys also have done that on half as many grievances because we filed 404,000 and you guys 205. And you guys also have the highest number per member. You're per payout, I guess. Your average is $546 per payment, and our average is only $145, considering the fact that we got double the grievances and almost the same number. So you guys got us beat at the amount paid, but we filed more grievances and we received the highest number of payments. We've received 2.4 million payments. You guys have received 600,000 payments. Now, those statistics sound like, it's debatable how the situation would crumble. Alternatively, I also want to mention highest grievance payment amounts per payee. So out of the top 10 employees out of that scope years, the 9 out of the 10 are carriers. 8 out of those 9 are from Illinois, 1's from Louisiana. And your one person is from Wisconsin. And so the number 1 employee for grievance settlements is $300,000 to one guy between 2022 and 2024. And the lowest of the top 10 is $197,000. So between the top 10, they've made $2.5 million in grievance payments. And one other thing I want to talk about is I think that APW in particular is interesting because with the fact that you have more money per payment and the fact that you have less grievances and less numbers of payments, I think it's great that you guys are paying each individual more money per grievance. That's kind of cool. But it looks like here that you guys also suffer the worst from some of the certain consequences. Like in here, crossing crafts, two of your craft people, you guys are not mail handlers, are you?
Technically, no. Some locals have a few, but in general, no.
So you're number two then, because mail handler is number one when it comes to crossing crafts. Clerks are number two. So, and you guys have us by double the crossing crafts. So that speaks volumes to me. And you tell me if this is wrong, but to me that sounds like you guys they're replacing you, and they're not hiring enough staff. They're having other people do your job. So that's coming out with payments. And they also mentioned the T7 thing where they got to do the tax. You guys have also the highest number of management doing craft work grievances. What do you want to say about that? Do you think that's interesting?
It's very interesting, and it's unfortunately a loaded topic. I can go a lot of places with this. For crossing crafts, management's been stealing our work for decades. The tax is probably the easiest big example. We used to have a timekeeping position in the clerk craft, timekeeping and attendance. That was taken away, and now we have attendance control officers and supervisors are doing tax.
What year was this timekeeping taken away?
It was early 2000s, I believe. They slowly phased out in the lead up to the universal clerk push.
Okay, cool. Do you have anything else to say about it before we wrap up?
I do. I think it comes down to some degree, a difference in philosophy, because our total payouts aren't that different. It is branch, or in our case, local specific, how we file grievances. But I do notice in the APWU, we'll do a lot of grievances, which we would call ongoing continuing violations, as opposed to repeatedly filed. So we may get bigger payouts with less grievances, but I don't think we're that far off.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just ridiculous. Hopefully this audit report does something where management gets on the ball and stops violating. So we'll move on from here. And is there anything you'd like to add before we go? Anything you'd like to tell my listeners or your listeners before we wrap it up?
Of course. I'd just like to say I love doing these with you, and I think it's educational to both of our audiences, APW and NALC members, and I hope we continue doing this. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I appreciate this. I'll see you on the other side, and we'll wrap this up. Let's see. All right.